Goodness me, that's very impressive. I was afraid we wouldn't be able to have a visit as I was off on a sort of tour in, the States and Canada. And here I am. You found me in about as remote a place as you could have found me. And I'm here, as you know, we're in Manitoba. We're right north of Winnipeg at a place called Victoria Beach on the lake that stretches out even further, hundreds of miles north. I'm here with my great friend Steve Bell, and we're having a little retreat in a kind of a cottage or cabin, which you can see here, which belongs to his friend and manager Dave Zaglinski. And we're sitting out on the porch and we're working on songs and stuff together. And we're going to do a combination of songs and poems. So I've got all 5 of my poetry books. Come around and have a little look here. So I've got all 5 of my poetry books, and I'm just making sure I find the right poems that we do for our concert. And it's great. I get to hear just coming out from the house, Steve running through his chops on his guitar, and then we'll be on this porch a little later, actually, maybe making a new song, maybe taking one of my poems and turning it into a song, or matching the poems and the songs. It's just glorious. It's a really good thing to do. But I was looking, if you have a little look at this, I can't travel with proper fountain pens because I find something with the pressure in the airplanes and just leak ink everywhere. So I pick up these biros from various places. But I don't know if I've shown you this before. So I always bring a manuscript notebook with me in the hope that this is a really lovely one by Paper Books. My good friend Kathy gave this to me. And of course, this is the fantastic Kai Rowe, Christ from the Book of Kells, on here. And I just make sure there's some space towards the end of one and carry on. But this is quite an interesting one. I was hoping, you'll see I've got my lovely Roger Lancelin green King Arthur, because I was hoping somehow in the intervals on these travels to carry on with my Arthurian epic. I have to say that hasn't happened. But yeah, this has got quite a lot of you might be quite interested. This has got quite a lot of the Arthurian stuff. It just picks up Lancelot continued. So I've got some in another notebook. I don't have like one notebook for one thing and another notebook for another, which would be so much more sensible. But I just pick up one and write it. This is exactly what Coleridge did. There's a fantastic edition of Coleridge's notebooks by a great Canadian scholar called Kathleen Coburn, which I'll show you when we get back to my proper study. I must show it you sometime. But one of the things that made her scholarship so astonishingly indefatigable is that she wanted to trace one Coleridgean passage or ideas. She'd have to find about 5 different notebooks, and so he started it in this one, and then he continues soaring, glorious prose, and then there's a recipe for cold pottage soup, and then there's a little thing about curing the ague, and then there's the rest of the bit of the poem, and then there's a bit of a poem he started on the previous notebook. So mine is a bit like that. But I'll tell you what fascinated me. I was just, it's sometimes quite good to look at your old notebooks and see where you went with it. So I realized the main thing I did with this notebook was when I was working on what eventually became this book, After Prayer, which was my set of poems on phrases from George Herbert's poem Prayer, where he has these phrases, the church's banquet, angel's age, God's breath in man. And I figured each one is so rich, like there could be a poem in it. So I see what I did here. If you come have a little look at this. It just says sonnet sequence on prayer. That's my idea. And what I must have done is I must have thought it'll take a couple of pages to work out. So I'd written the church's banquet, and then I've written angel's age, and then I've written God's breath in man returning to his birth. And then I've kind of used one page to work out the ideas, and then the other page to try and write it out a little bit fair. And sometimes, to be honest, I needed more than that. I mean, this one hasn't got the fullest. This is the first one. So I'm trying to get at the idea of prayer is this rich, abundant variety. It's not. So I've got here, not some strict modicum, exact allowance, meagre prescription, rule-bound regimen, but beauty and gratuitous abundance. That's what I've crossed out. Lovely. Delicious something and exuberance. I'm kind of feeling my way in there. I haven't quite got the full rhythm. Not the church, so I try again, not the church's modest modicum, meagre prescription, exact allowance. And then I'm saying, its gift, its hospitality, not something hasty, always snatched alone, the soul's swift junk food. That became in that soul swift junk food is not quite right, but that became junkets of junk food fueling our disease. It's like I'm nearly there, but not quite. And the some lines are there, not to be worked for, not another task, but love that's lavished on us full and free. Rich wine flowing from an unstopped flask. Then gift after gift, sheer hospitality. Well, that became course after course of hospitality. So it's quite interesting. It's encouraging to me in some ways when I see like how sort of hesitant some early drafts are. I'll read you the actual poem as it came out. Also, I kind of like this transition, that somehow you hope that this, with these extraordinary thumbprints and all the crossings out, will eventually become this. And so I'm hoping that this unfinished Arthurian poem will also eventually become the thing it needs to be. But why don't I just read you the church's banquet, which I quite enjoyed writing, I have to say. I love the idea of God's largesse, his pleroma, his overflowingness, like all of this. He doesn't just give us, one astonishing fir tree. He gives us hundreds of thousands of them, just astonishing. So anyway, here's the prayer, the church's banquet. Not some strict modicum, exact allowance, precise prescription, rigid regimen, but beauty and gratuitous abundance, capacious grace beyond comparison. Not something hasty, always snatched alone, junkets of junk food fueling our dis-ease. Not little snacklets eaten on the run, but peace and plenty taken at our ease. Not to be worked for, not another task, but love that's lavished on us full and free, course after course of hospitality, and rich wine flowing from an unstopped flask. He paid the price before we reach the inn, and all he asks of us is to begin. When I look in the manuscript book, that final couplet's nowhere to be seen. Like, I obviously abandoned it. I didn't know how to end that poem. I just knew there was something around there, and it must have come some other time. I must have been mulling over in my mind. Okay, that's it. Now I know. And then the rest of it seals itself. Anyway, so there's spaces for, and various goes at all the other poems in that. And then mostly there's a few, sometimes every so often I go on a conference and there's almost illegible notes of the conference. There's a nice thing here. I went to the Wade Centre. Do you remember you came and found me there? This is my notes on Lewis's underlinings and notes in Coleridge's Biographia Literaria. Where he's actually, it's got great pathos. There's a bit where Coleridge is saying you're trying to work out, are you really a poet? And of course, Lewis really, really wanted to be a poet more than anything else. And Coleridge realizes sometimes we think we are and we aren't. Here's the phrase: we mistake intense desire of poetic reputation for a natural poetic genius. Actually, I think Lewis had a natural poetic genius, but he underlined that rather tragically in his copy of Coleridge. It was like a note to self, oh man, I didn't make the cut. So one of the reasons why it gave me pleasure when I contributed to the Cambridge Companion to C.S. Lewis to write a vindication of Lewis as a poet. Anyway, we could get lost forever in that. And probably I ought to be getting on with some work with Steve. But hey, thanks for tracking me down. I hope you enjoy a good wander in the Manitoba woods. Now, be careful for the bears. There's actual bears around here. It's fantastic. You can see them moving around. It's brilliant. Anyway, thanks for calling around. Cheers.